Now I'm gonna get some hate for this, but you don't need to have years of experience to get good at After Effects, and I'll prove it to you in today's tutorial. If you've been following along, this video is part 3 of my collage series where we complete the entire opener. I encourage you to check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't done so yet. Now let's get started by jumping into After Effects. So we're in After Effects here, and I'm gonna give you guys a very quick recap just so you guys know where we are in the project. So we start here with our animation in scene 1, then we go to scene 2. And the thing that we did here, we actually put scene 2 within the scene 1 pre-comp because we have this 3D camera animation going on. After, when we go back to our main comp here, we have scene 2. And where things left off is we actually created our own ink mat to reveal scene 3, where we will be working from today. So I encourage you to check out those other videos. If you haven't done so yet, I will link them in the description below. Now let's get started with scene 3. So the first thing I'm going to do with my background is actually go back to our render comp here, go to scene 1, go to scene 2, and then I'm going to copy the values from our tint and levels effect and paste those on to our scene 3. So that does a lot of the work for us already. But we're going to treat this background with a couple different fun techniques that we haven't used yet in the series. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I have a couple more assets I created in Midjourney. And I asked for this like British newspaper. It's clearly not a newspaper, but that's what it gave me. I'm just going to scale this up here. Maybe something like this. Do something like, I don't know, 225. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is create a mask around here. And what we're going to do here is something a little bit different. We're actually going to fake some like 3D movement. So typically, if you see my videos before, we have a 3D camera, we put things in different Z spaces. And while we could do that for this, I'm going to show you guys a little shortcut so we don't necessarily have to go through all of those extra steps for this example specifically. So I'm going to feather this out to something like, let's say 160. And I'm going to apply a tint effect. We'll drop the opacity to something like, I don't know, 40, and we will change the blending mode to soft light. So this is very, very subtle. I'll just give it full resolution so you could really barely see what's going on here. But what we're gonna do is animate the mask from left to right. So I will press M and I will set a keyframe for our mask path. So what I'll do here is go to the end of our composition, which is about 12 seconds. And I'm just going to click Control T. I'm just going to drag this across like this, and it's gonna automatically create a keyframe right there. And this is going to remain a linear animation, meaning that we are not doing any sort of easing to this. And as you see here, very subtly, there is this little background movement going on. Really simple stuff, but it's these little touches that's going to elevate your overall design. All right, the next thing we're going to do is something similar, but with our sword. We have this British sword drawing that I created in Midjourney, and what I'm going to do is bring this up. I'm going to apply tint to this, and then I'm going to apply levels. And with that, I'm going to just make some adjustments to add more contrast to this photo. Okay, that looks good. Now what I'm gonna do is change the blending mode to classic color burn. So now I'm gonna drop the opacity here. Something like, I don't know, 45, that looks pretty good. And what we're gonna do here is we're actually going to do a couple different animations. So to start, I'm going to set a keyframe right here. Then we go to the very end, and I'm just going to bring this over like that. So this is also going to remain as a linear animation. And now we have this kind of parallaxing look where we have one object going from right to left and the other going from left to right. So that is how we are kind of faking that 3D movement right here. Very subtle stuff. But I want to do something similar in terms of like a mask animation, like how we did with our newspaper. So what I'm gonna do with our British sword is I'm actually gonna create a mask outside of the object, and then I'm going to set a keyframe here, and then I'm gonna go all the way towards the end, and then I'm going to adjust this part of the mask all the way through. I'm going to feather this out to something like, let's say 320, and see how that looks. All right, so I like the way this is looking, but I want to make further adjustments. I think for one, what I want to do is bring in our path, our mask path just a little bit sooner. And then with our animation, I actually want to slow this down. So I'm just going to make this really subtle. All right, and then I'm actually going to just make some further adjustments here, see what looks good. Our background looks good, so let's go on to the next step here. What I'm going to do is create some shape layers with lines. We'll change the color to black here. We'll drop the stroke to something like 10. We might end up changing this. I'm going to set a point there, set a point there. Looks pretty good. What I'm going to do from here is center this up. And the anchor point is slightly off center, so I'm just going to center that up here too. All right, now that we have our line, we're going to do a similar principle to what we've done in some of the previous videos in the series. So I'm going to add a trim path right here. And we're going to start the animation at the 6 frame mark. So I'm going to drop this down here. I'm going to change the start point to 50. I'm going to set a keyframe. And then I'm going to start the end point at 50 and set a keyframe. Now I want this animation to go a full second. So I'm going to go up to the 1 second and 6 frame mark here. And then I'm going to adjust these parameters. So now we have this slow movement just like this. Real simple stuff. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight this, right click, keyframe assistant, ease out. Right here, highlight them, right click, keyframe assistant, ease in. So here's how that looks now. Nice, that looks good. And we will call this black line. Now what I'm going to do is duplicate this and call this red line. What I'm going to do here is change the stroke to a different color here. And then what I need to do is offset the keyframes here. So I actually want the red line to show first. So I'm just going to show our keyframes here. And so I'm going to bring down the keyframes to our black line to something like 12 frames. So now we're going to start to see a red line, and it's going to be covered by a black line. Offsetting keyframes is a really fun, useful technique to use. So I encourage you to experiment with stuff like this. Another subtle thing we're going to do is we're going to actually change the blend mode from on our red line from normal to multiply. All right, this looks good so far, but now we need stuff to actually come out of the lines. So how do we do that? I'll show you. I'm going to pull up our shape layer tool here, and I'm going to enable fill, and I'm just going to use like a random bright color here, and I'm going to create this big box like this. We'll drop it below, and I want to center this up the best I can with the line. That looks good. And I'm actually going to move the anchor point to the center here, and then I'm going to unchain the scale here, and I'm just going to extend this out like this. Real easy. And then from there, I'm going to call this Mat 1. I'm going to duplicate this, going to rotate it 180 degrees, and then I'm going to give it a different color. Do this yellow, sure. We'll call this Mat 2. So it's real important here that we actually take our red line and both of our mats, and then we parent them to our black line, because the black line is going to be driving our animation for our assets. So the thing about our mats is that we don't actually ever need to see them. So I'm going to highlight them both and hide them. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is create a fun circle animation. So I'm going to pull up the ellipse tool right here. I'm going to change the fill to this hex code right here. It's almost a pure black. And I'm going to create the circle. And then I'm going to center up our anchor point. And then I'm going to align this to the center of everything. And so what I want to do with this is do something similar to like a trim path animation. But there's something I want to show you guys. Right now we have our shape layer set to a fill. So when I go to add trim paths, when I try to animate this, it's going to look a little weird, right? It's going to all animate from that point. And that just looks a little bit off. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it correctly. I'm going to copy this hex code, and then I'm going to disable the fill. And then I'm going to enable the stroke and paste it in there. And we're going to grow this out like this. And what we need to do now is shrink it. Now everything's in line with one another. So I know that I can put in really accurate percentage points and not have to worry about that. So on the circle layer, we already added our trim paths right here. Now when I change this to 50%, we see exactly half of the circle. All I need to do right here is just change the values of our offset to -90. So now we have a perfect half circle. What I'm going to do here is bring our endpoint to 0 right here, set a keyframe, and then go up to 1 second and 20 frames, and then bring this to 50. If I bring it past that, it's going to complete the circle, and we don't want that. All right, so here's what we have. And we're going to do similar easing as before, where I right-click, keyframe assistant, ease out, and then ease in on this last keyframe. Nice. I'm going to set the blend mode here to overlay. And then a very important step, as I mentioned before, I want to parent this to the black line. I'm going to give the black line like a different color, just so it stands out a little bit more, since it's going to be our driving force for the animation. And I'm going to put it on top. All right, so the next thing I need to do is bring in our British knight. So I have this knight asset I also created in Midjourney, and this is something I did not mask out in Photoshop, so this is how it originally looks. So what I need to do is mask out the helmet right here, because that's really the only part I want to use. So I'm just going to take my pen tool, and then I'm going to start to mask this out real quickly. All right, now that this is masked out, what I need to do is feather the mask a little bit so we don't have any hard edges. So I'll change the feather to something like 4. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is apply a tint effect. And then I'm going to apply levels. And I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a crunch and contrast in its look. Nice. And then I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay, something like that. I think that looks pretty good. And I can continue to mess with the parameters. So what we need to do next is actually do some fun animations with our line, and then we're going to put the knight in the circle. So I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. I'm going to hide our knight for now. I'm going to go to our black line, and I'm going to click R for rotation, then Shift P for position. And then I'm going to go down to the 1 second mark here. I'm going to set a keyframe for the rotation. I'm going to go up to the 120 mark, and then we'll rotate this around and see what we like. I want it to rotate this way, so I'm going to set the value to -45. I'm going to let it hold for a couple frames here, and then I'm going to set another keyframe for position, and then bring that to about 1 second, and then bring this over to the right, like this. We have this rotation followed by this position. Now what I want to do is actually turn this rotation on its head. So I'm going to bring it around the other way to something like, let's say 120. That looks pretty good. All right, so here's what we have so far. Now, what I want to do is actually hold this keyframe for a couple of frames and then start the release point for this next rotation right here. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it right here so it holds. All right, so now I need to do some easing. So I'm going to select the keyframes where the start of the animations are, keyframe assistant ease out, and then with the other ones, I'm going to ease in so it looks a little smoother. Nice, that looks good. So now what I want to do is put our knight in our circle. So I'm going to go to this point right here, and I'm going to line up and see where I want him in the actual circle. So I'm going to shrink him up a little bit. So I'm just going to make some further adjustments here. And I kind of want to adjust some of this stuff right here too. So we'll just change this to something like 0.7. That looks a little bit better. The cool thing about this is we're actually going to matte the British knight to our circle right here. And we're going to show our circle again. So now he only shows when the circle reveals. But there's an issue. We leave him behind. And it's because we need to parent him also to the black line right here. So I'm just going to parent him right there like that. So now he will travel with everything else. All right, so now we have our line animation, our circle, our knight, and then we have the reveal, but we need to actually reveal something. So what do we want to reveal? We want to reveal text. So I'm going to pull up our text tool here and type in King Henry. I'm going to change the font to the Adobe font we've been using, which is the Dodoni. And then I'm going to center this up here. I'm going to increase the size as well. I'm going to hold down Alt and the arrow key so we create some more separation. You can also do that with this tool right here. It's probably a little easier. And then what I need to do is center this up like that. So we have the start of our animation and this text, but how are we going to reveal the text behind these abstract shapes? Well, if you remember earlier on, we created our mats. So we have these mats right here. And I created two just in case we wanted to show anything else and just had the luxury of having them. So we have this right here, this mat 1, and this takes up a lot of space. So I think we're going to be in good shape here. What I'm going to do is click P for position. And what I want to do is really line up the timing of this. So I have my keyframes pulled up for our black line, and I'm going to, let's just say, set a keyframe here for our endpoint. And then I'm going to bring in King Henry like this. I'm going to right click, keyframe assistant, ease out, keyframe assistant, ease in. So now it'll come out like that, but I still need to make some further adjustments here. Very importantly, I need to get our matte 1 here. I need to track matte our King Henry text to matte 1. Now it's only going to be coming out of what this green rectangle is right there. So right now, we still see it right here because that rectangle takes up a lot of space. So I'm just going to cut it off to about right here. So I'll click Alt in brackets so we don't need to see the text until that point. All right. All right, so now we have our line animation, our circle animation, followed by our text reveal. So we're getting really close to the end here. What I want to do next is bring in our stroke circle. So we have our stroke circle. So I'm going to bring this in, and we use this in scene 2, and I really like it, so I'm going to use it again. I'm going to just line it up to where I want it to be, like that. Okay, I want to give this the same color as our red line. So I'm just going to copy our hex code right here, and then I'm going to apply fill, and paste it right there like that. And then I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply. Similar to what we've done in scene 2, I'm going to do the same type of text stroke reveal. So I'll just solo this for right now, and then I'm going to pull up our pen tool here, and I will make this, really, we can make it any color. I'm going to shrink this down a lot, something like 20. And now what I'm going to do is basically trace the outline of the stroke circle. Real easy stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect because this line needs to be thicker anyways. So I'm just going to thicken it up like that. Cool. So I'll show everything again. And now what I want to do is time up the circle with the text animation. So I want my text to animate in first. And right around when it starts to animate, right around when it's almost at its completion, I'm going to start to animate this the shape layer we have. And I'll call this circle matte. I'm going to apply a trim pass to this. Then I'm going to set the endpoint to 0, put down a keyframe, go up a little bit, set another keyframe, and then I'm going to do the same type of easing we've done before. So right click, keyframe assistant, ease out, right click, keyframe assistant, ease in. And then what I'm going to do is actually track matte the stroke circle to our matte. So now we don't see it anymore. Nice. Just a little trick I want to show you guys. Say we like the width of this, but we wanted to stretch it out, make it a little bit taller. All I would need to do, I would highlight both layers, click S, unlike the chains, and then I would just grow this like this. So you could still see both and have a good stroke circle. All right, so this animation is almost complete, but we need to finish the animation the way we started it in scene 1, and that is by adding a crown over the letter I right here. So I'm just gonna find our crown from earlier. Now we have it. I'm going to shrink it down, and we're going to do the same type of animation that we did in scene 1. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I'm just going to place this where I think it looks good. All right. It looks good. And then I want to time things out now. So when do things really come in? So like right here. And I want to start this crown animation before the stroke circle ends, so we just have that continuous fluid movement that we're working with here. So I'm going to click R for rotation and hold on Shift and click P for position. I'm going to set keyframes here, and I'm going to bump those down because this is where we want our endpoint to be. I'm going to go down a little bit, maybe like right here, and then I'm going to set the rotation to something like -14. And then I'm going to go up, I don't know, let's say 12 frames. So I will go up, and then I will change the rotation to +14, and then we'll go down another 12 frames here, and we will end right here. Now what we're going to do with this, similar to what we did in the first example, is we're actually going to apply our flow easing. So I'm going to highlight our keyframes here, go to our flow plugin, and I'm going to apply this circ preset, just like that. That way it just saves me a little bit of time, and I like the way this animates in. So that looks good. Now what I want to do with this is actually cut off the first few frames here. So it's already coming in mid-animation. All right. So this is looking better. What I need to do now is just, I kind of want to adjust the timing of this. Looks good. Let's see how this looks. All right, I'm going to shade this down a couple more frames. Nice. Extend that to the back. Perfect. All right, so now we have our crown animated in. And if we wanted to, we can make some further adjustments to this. Say we wanted to make it a little bit brighter. This is all optional stuff, but I like to play around with the look and feel of things. Yeah, that looks really good. So now we have our animation in full, but let's be honest about something. You guys would not be watching this entire series and going to this point without wanting some sauce. So I'm gonna show you guys some extra secrets I have here just to spice this edit up just a little bit further. So let's go back to our circle right here. I'm going to duplicate our circle, call this circle 2. So what I'm actually going to do is apply the red fill color that we've been using on some of our other assets here and apply it here. And I'm going to scale this up, and then I'm going to shrink down the stroke. So now it's starting to look really unique. We'll scale this up, shrink the stroke like that. All right, I want to change the blend mode here from overlay to multiply. I think it'll look, yeah, that looks a lot better. And you can have this like nice clean cut circle. I think that looks totally fine here, the way that looks. It looks really cool. I want to roughen it up a little bit. So how else do we do that other than a roughen edges? And then I'm going to change the border to 37. I'm going to change the edge sharpness to 10. And then I'm going to change the scale to 10. So it looks more kind of like a brush stroke. I've changed the complexity to 10. And then what I'm going to do is apply an expression. So I'm going to hold down Alt, click on the evolution right here, and I'm going to paste in this expression. I'll make sure all the expressions I use are in the description below. And this expression is posterizeTime 3 followed by time asterisk 1000. So there's going to be this like subtle, like kind of like crinkly look on the actual outside texture. So you see the style we're going with, but I think it looks a little out of place to have our black line and our red line look a little bit clean like how they are. So I'm going to go to our, we'll just start with our red line. And I'm going to apply a roughen edges effect again. And we're going to do some similar but different adjustments. I'm going to change this to the border to 11.5. I'll change the edge sharpness to 10. I'll change the scale to 10. And then I'm going to change the complexity to 10. And then I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to type in posterizeTime 3 followed by time asterisk 1000. Nice. So now we have this little flicker look. Looks pretty cool. And all I'm going to do is copy that, and I'm going to apply it to our black line. So now here's what we have. Oh, this is looking so good. Okay. All right, so the last bit of sauce we're going to do is add some displacement because we've already done that in scenes 1 and 2, and I feel like we need to be consistent with what we've been doing. So I'm going to go back to our castle wall texture that we've been using in every video in this series. Pull this up. And I'm just going to change the color here so it stands out a little bit. I'm going to apply a tint, and I'm going to bring it to scale. We'll hide it. All right, so like similar to what we've done in other videos, now what we're going to do is apply a displacement map to our background, but we're going to do it to our sword. So I'm going to find our sword right here. I'm going to apply a displacement map. I'm going to change our values here to 0 and to luminance. And we're going to do a horizontal displacement because we're moving things in a horizontal direction. So that's kind of the mindset that we have with this. And I want to time it out with the timing of this text right here. So I'm going to set a keyframe right here. Click U. And then I'm going to go up, set another keyframe, change this to something like 90. All right, I'm going to highlight these, and then I'm going to apply flow like this. Here's what we have. All right, I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit. Yeah. This is looking so good. I realize I actually want my mask path animation for the sword to come in sooner too, so we could see more of it at this point. So now let's see how this looks. Oh yeah. I love it. This looks so good. All right, so scene 3 is now officially done. So now we're going to take a look into our main comp here and see how everything times out. So we have our scene 1 that we'd created, followed by scene 2. Then scene 3, and I want to see how this times out with the ink bleed right here that we created. That looks good. So we have this little bit of anticipation from scene 2 with the displacement, and then it goes right into scene 3. Things are still, that movement's still staying. Now we have this jump off right here, and that's because our ink mat is only 3 seconds long. So there's 2 ways we can fix this. The first way we can fix this is we can go to composition settings, change the time, extend the layers. That's one way you can go about it. I have another method I like to use. I like to right click on this, go to time, freeze on last frame, and that way it does it for me. By having it freeze on the last frame here, it stays, and that way we could see our entire scene 3. Some more things you could do with this: we could add more posterized times onto different effects. We could also enable motion blur. For the Vox style, you don't normally do that, but it's really up to you. Nonetheless, I encourage you to have fun with it. I will have the project file linked in the description below, and this is how you create a Vox style collage animation opener using Adobe After Effects. Let me know what you enjoyed most about this tutorial series. Thanks for watching, and stay creative.